part that Jean Purdy played and the fact that she was dismissed is as important as anything else about the movie.
Making babies in test tubes.
You truly believe you can do that?
We're making the impossible possible. We are. You'll see.
For you, when you're portraying a real-life person, does it feel different to other roles? Like, is there a sense of more responsibility to tell their story?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you know, you can't just start from scratch. You have to honour their memory, and particularly someone like Bob Edwards, whose family is still very much with us. You know, he died in, you know, not about 10 years ago, I think. So, maybe 15. But he, you know, his daughters are coming to the premiere tonight. 25 of his family are all coming to the premiere. So yeah, I mean, I was aware that this film was going to be hopefully appreciated by his family, and you have a kind of responsibility to honour the memory and do the work and find that energy and try and avoid mimicry, I think, but just find the essence of someone. And then at the end of the day, once that work's done, you kind of have to put it aside and just be in that moment with the person, the actor you're opposite, and otherwise a mimicry and being too caught up in the challenge of replicating someone's life can be unhelpful.
It's a huge responsibility, and it's also a big story. It's a story that has affected millions and millions and millions of people, and so wanting to do that justice and to tell it with respect and as truthfully as possible is a big responsibility.
And during the film, we do see some of the real-life footage of when the birth and all of them behind the scenes. So was that part of the help for you to not mimic him, but also just to sort of understand the person? Yeah,
it's about finding a voice as well, and he wrote a book called A Matter of Life, which he wrote with Patrick Steptoe, and in Bob's parts of the book you really do feel that boundless energy, which a lot of people have kind of talked about, and so it was about that. Yeah, it was a voice, it was a temperament, an inner tempo. And then, of course, we were lucky enough to have all this footage, which is of Jean and Patrick and Bob in the lab. And we also had this amazing embryologist called Brooke Wilson, who works at Bourne Hall, which is the first IVF clinic originally set up by Bob and Patrick and Jean. So we had their kind of lineage coming through with us on the film set, which was really special. But what I really took from the videos and the footage of them in the lab was the care that they took, you know, the detail and the specificity and the sort of how sacred each of those embryos were, you know, the walking around. And of course, like, these things were everything. The film testifies to that when, you know, Landrum Shettles, there's a embryologist in America and they expose it to the air, and they can't believe how sort of sacrilegious that is. So that was very important, the videos, and just hearing anecdotes about the man, you know, that he had these 5 daughters, and I think he was a real eccentric, but really loved. So I just tried to tap into just a positive wealth of energy.
Yeah, that charm inside of him comes across really well in the film, for sure.
Good.
I didn't want to see any footage of them. I don't really want to see. I think I accidentally saw a photograph of Patrick Steptoe. I didn't want to know what he looked like. In fact, I think I said that to the producer. She said, just be assured, she said, you're good casting. I said, okay, I'll take that. Only because I'm not a mimic, and I'm not attempting to, you know, to mimic Patrick Steptoe's behaviour or vocal rhythms or anything of that kind.
There's like, you see her in one interview and there's like 2 photos of her, I think, which isn't a lot to go by, but you can really get a sense of who she was in that video, in that footage, and in the photos. I mean, in the interview she was in, she was barely acknowledged. Like, the role that she played, the huge role she played, wasn't acknowledged at all in the interview. She was kind of, I don't know, just, yeah, kind of dismissed in a weird way. But she was very softly spoken, obviously very smart, obviously quite a personal human. And even in the photos, she didn't take centre stage. She didn't seem to be very comfortable in front of the camera. She kind of took a step back. There were lots of hints as to who she was. So yeah, our job was to kind of connect the dots. Yeah, I feel like incredibly honoured to have been able to play Jean. yeah, so honoured.
Is it that aspect of this real story? Because for me, not knowing much about this and the development of IVF, that final title card where it comes up that like her plaque wasn't added, her name wasn't added to the plaque to 2015, but then you see all those incredible statistics, what this development has led to. Is that what surprised you the most about the true story? The fact that there was this third person that history almost forgot if it wasn't for Bob Edwards and his campaigning?
Well, for me, I mean, I knew about IVF before filming, before I got the role, but I didn't know the ins and outs of it. So for me, gene and IVF have always gone together. Yeah. You know, it's not like I found out about her after having found out about Bob and Patrick's work. For me, gene is IVF. The most surprising thing to me was how recent of a technology it is. Louise Brown, the first person to be born of IVF, is in her mid-40s. She was born in 78. Yeah. Like, that's very recent.
I think the stroke of genius from Jack Thorne and Rachel Mason, who wrote the script, was that they came at it from the point of view of Jean and the women who are part of the Ovum Club, those women who sacrifice so much. Because a version of this film is from the point of view of the men and the scientists, and you know they've already received their due credit. Bob won the Nobel Prize, and everyone knows Patrick. Well, within this world, Patrick Steptoe and Bob Edwards are very much kind of heralded as these, you know, pioneers. And Jean was the kind of quieter lab technician, lab research kind of assistant who, wasn't given any due credit. And it's just so touching that Bob and Patrick fought so hard so that she was credited, because they did say many times, you know, she was invaluable. And the film speaks to the importance of collaboration. You know, those moments I find really touching when Bob looks at Jean and goes, "It's a good idea. It's a really good idea." And you know that in that moment, Jean has contributed something to the science which was, you know, absolutely so important and crucial to the development of the science. So, it's a celebration of Jean, it's a celebration of women, but also there are these good men present who have allowed for this incredibly important progress and scientific kind of discovery.
The fact that they completely airbrushed Jean Purdy's contribution, given that she did actually provide the final piece of the puzzle that made IVF possible, the fact that they could, I don't think they even consciously thought about it in those days. She was a woman, you know, she didn't have a penis, and therefore she was dismissed. It's incredible. I mean, I'm sure it still happens. But that was one of the most satisfying things. So this film would be the first time that she was given full credit for what she'd achieved, and in some way goes to redress the balance.
There's very little information about Jean Purdy. She died when she was 39 from cancer, and she was an incredibly private person, and she left no surviving family. She didn't have kids of her own, so it was quite difficult to find information about her. But Jack and Rachel, the co-creators, they did painstaking research, years of research, to find out as much as they possibly could about Jean and about IVF and the invention of it, and about each character involved. They talked to people who were there. They talked to Patrick Steptoe's sons and Bob Edwards' daughters, and they talked to Grace MacDonald, who had the first boy, world's first IVF boy. It's a bit of a mouthful. And she had direct interaction with Jean, so Grace gave some beautiful anecdotes about Jean, which shed light on her. So I took a lot from the script. A lot of that was in the script, and I also did my own separate research. So I found where she lived in Cambridge, and I went there. I had a look at the house, not inside because people lived there, and I was a bit too shy to knock on the door. But I saw it, and I saw the street. I had a little walk around there. And I went to Oldham, where the film was set, and walked the paths that Jean would have walked with Bob and Patrick. And I went to where their first clinic was located. There was lots of I made a huge effort to like get to know Jean as much as I could. And my like job as an actor is to kind of to fill in the gaps, to bring it to life. And I really hope that I have done that in the most respectful way.
Does it feel like this is coming out at a perfect time as well? Because sadly, the conversation over women's right to choose, not necessarily so much in this country, but elsewhere in the world, it's still a very timely, important topic.
It's become that even more so since we made the film. The film wasn't made in response to that, but yes, it has. And I think it's great now that there is a dramatised version of these events, which hopefully will help people clarify their thinking about it.
Things have moved on, and you know the amazing statistic at the end when you take the Louise Brown story and then it says 12 million IVF babies have been since born worldwide. It's sort of astounding, and for me almost the most moving piece in the movie is that sort of statistic is quite incredible. And you're right that right now we are unfortunately in a period of confusion, and there are sinister forces at play which are threatening the progress that has been made over the last 50 years. This film has been developed for 10 years though, so it was never intended to be a politically motivated or ideologically motivated movie. It is a very pure celebration of three good people doing a good thing, for the greater good, and doing it selflessly and making great sacrifices in order to get it over the line. That said, I feel incredibly lucky to be in this country right now where women's rights to choice, control over their reproductive rights, abortion is intact. It's terrifying how fragile those rights are, and as we are seeing in other countries, particularly in America right now. So if this film will be a catalyst for important conversations, and maybe over in America will remind people of the importance of this science and how much joy, how the purity of it, 12 million babies, how much joy that brought about into the world. The idea of in any way threatening this science is absurd. Yeah. So I hope that it could be an important catalyst. It was never intended to be so.
But it's just sometimes films come out at the
fortuitously,
right time, as
exactly.
everything.